Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to a time when humanity decided that pointy sticks and horses just weren't enough anymore. So they built machines that could erase thousands of people in minutes. Yes, welcome to World War I, the Great War, the one that was supposed to end all wars. It didn't, but it did end several million human beings and the last remnants of any romantic notion about honor on the battlefield. So dim the lights, maybe sip something warm, and let's quietly wander through the mud, the smoke, and the absurd ingenuity of the weapons that changed World War I, and by extension, the way humans wage war forever. It's 1914. Europe is basically one big, over-decorated family reunion where everyone's related, slightly inbred, and absolutely hates each other. The royal cousins, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and King George V of Britain are all related by blood and apparently a shared inability to stay calm. When the Archduke Franz Ferdinand got shot in Sarajevo by a nervous teenager who probably didn't think this would spiral into global chaos, Europe's nations reacted like dominoes soaked in gunpowder. The armies marched off with brass bands and flags, promising they'd be home by Christmas. Spoiler, they weren't. Because, for the first time in history, humans had brought enough industrial-grade murder tools to make sure nobody went home easily. The machine gun, humanity's new best frenemy. Let's start with the humble machine gun, a weapon so efficient at ending lives that generals took years to admit it existed. Before the war, most officers still believed in the glorious charge. You know, brave men running across open fields, shouting, waving swords. That ended the first week of the war. The Maxim gun, invented back in the 1880s by Hiram Maxim, who was basically the Elon Musk of Victorian death gadgets, could fire about 600 rounds a minute. That's 10 bullets per second. Steady, mechanical, soulless. British soldiers dragged them to the front lines, where they quickly discovered that a single gun, if well positioned, could mow down entire battalions like someone trimming the lawn. The Germans, ever efficient, noticed this too and built their own, the MG-08, a water-cooled masterpiece of over-engineering. You could almost admire it if it wasn't, built for mass killing. By the end of the first year, both sides had dug deep into the earth, trenches, stretching from the North Sea to Switzerland. Why? Because when a gun can turn a man into a statistic before he reaches the next field, you stop running forward. You start digging. Artillery. The god of war gets an upgrade. Of course, if you couldn't hit the enemy directly, you could just blow up the ground he stood on. Artillery had existed for centuries, but World War I took it to operatic levels. The big guns became the gods of the front. They fired shells that could travel miles and land with the force of small earthquakes. Men lived under constant thunder. Not poetic thunder, but industrial, repetitive, mind-shattering thunder. One French soldier described the sound as the sky cracking open again and again. Another said you could feel the shock waves in your bones, which, sounds like a great recipe for lifelong trauma. The Germans even made a weapon so enormous it got a name worthy of a fairy tale villain. Big Bertha, a 42-centimeter howitzer weighing 47 tons, firing shells the size of small cars, because subtlety was dead. Of course, once the war began, every nation wanted its own Big Bertha. The British had their BL 15-inch howitzer. The French had Schneider guns, and soon the Western Front became one long, noisy exchange of explosives. By 1916, artillery caused about 60% of all casualties in the war. It didn't discriminate. It just obliterated. You could be standing in the safest corner of a trench, writing a letter home, and suddenly, you weren't. It's hard to overstate how miserable that was. The mud, the shock waves, the smell of cordite and death. Soldiers called it drum fire when the shelling lasted for days, not hours, and the ground literally vibrated like a heartbeat of steel and madness.
And because humans never stop innovating, they started combining artillery with the next delightful invention: gas. Poison gas, because breathing should be optional. If machine guns made people stop running, poison gas made them stop breathing. It began with the Germans, who, in 1915, decided to unleash chlorine gas on the French lines near Ypres, Belgium. Imagine a greenish-yellow fog slowly rolling across the battlefield. At first, the French soldiers didn't know what it was. Then they started coughing, choking, clawing at their throats. Chlorine burns the lungs from the inside out. A perfectly efficient way to turn a human being into a gasping, blind, terrified wreck. Soon, everyone joined in, because of course they did. The British made phosgene, which was 18 times deadlier. Then came mustard gas, which didn't just choke you, it blistered your skin, your eyes, your lungs. It lingered for days in the mud, waiting for anyone foolish enough to breathe or touch it. Masks became standard issue, those haunting, bug-eyed gas masks that made soldiers look like something from a surreal nightmare. Even horses wore them, because war, apparently, needed to involve everyone. And yet, for all the horror gas inflicted, it didn't win the war. It just made it crueler, slower, and more absurd. The wind could blow it back toward your own lines, and often did. Nature, as usual, refused to pick a side. Tanks, the metal monsters, crawl in. Eventually, someone in Britain, perhaps after too many sleepless nights, thought, what if we just built a moving box of steel that can't be shot? Enter the tank. The first ones, in 1916, were awkward, slow, and prone to breaking down. They looked like angry toasters, but when they worked, they terrified the enemy. The idea was simple: cross no man's land, crush barbed wire, survive machine guns. Reality was less impressive. Many overheated before even reaching the front line. Some couldn't climb small ditches. A few actually went in circles because their steering systems were so bad. But still, they moved, and that alone was revolutionary. The first real deployment was at the Battle of the Somme, where British tanks rolled forward in a slow, grumbling parade of hope and mechanical noise. The Germans panicked. They had never seen such a thing. Sure, the tanks weren't fast or reliable, but psychologically, they changed everything. The idea that soldiers could move under armor, shielded from bullets, sparked a new era. By 1918, tanks were improving, faster, more coordinated, and eventually decisive. The war of machines had truly begun. Planes, the sky joins the chaos. Meanwhile, above the mud, men were learning to fight in the clouds. Airplanes were new, just over a decade old, and at first they were used to scout enemy positions. Then someone thought, what if we just built a moving box of steel that can't be shot?
If we just shoot at each other up here? Thus began the first dogfights, where pilots circled and spun in fragile wooden planes, trying to hit each other with pistols and early machine guns. Some planes literally had to be built with interrupter gears so the bullets wouldn't shoot through their own propellers. Trial and error, mostly error. Soon, nations were building dedicated fighter planes, Fokker DRI triplanes, Sopwith Camels, Spads, with synchronized guns and lightweight engines. They were death traps, but glamorous ones. Ace pilots like the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, became celebrities, knights of the sky. Below them, bombers were being developed too. Tiny payloads at first, small bombs dropped by hand, then larger machines that could carry real explosives deep into enemy territory. It was clumsy and experimental, but it marked the start of modern air warfare. The sky was no longer neutral. Submarines, the silent hunters. And under the sea, another new monster lurked: the submarine. Germany's U-boats changed naval warfare overnight. Before WWI, ships fought visibly: cannons, decks, flags, honor. Now, entire vessels could vanish beneath the waves, wait silently, and strike unseen.
The U-boats prowled the Atlantic, sinking merchant ships and spreading fear among sailors. One of the most infamous events came in 1915, when the Lusitania, a civilian liner, was torpedoed by a German U-boat. Nearly 1,200 people died, among them 128 Americans, which, as you might guess, didn't go over well in the United States. That moment planted the seeds for America's later entry into the war. Submarines, with their stealth and efficiency, turned the ocean into another invisible battlefield. And once again, humanity applauded itself for the ingenuity before realizing it had just made the world even more terrifying.
Industrialization of death. By 1916, the war was no longer about bravery or even strategy. It was about output, factories, logistics, machines. Nations became engines of war production. Tens of millions of shells, bullets, and bombs rolled out every month. Human beings were the moving parts in a gigantic machine built to destroy itself. Generals, trained in the old ways, still believed in offensives, so they sent men forward, again and again, into machine guns, artillery, and wire. Battles like the Somme and Verdun became synonymous with endless loss. Hundreds of thousands died for a few hundred yards of mud. And yet, the weapons kept improving. More efficient, more reliable, more final. By the war's end in 1918, the world had learned a strange new truth. Human ingenuity, when paired with industrial capacity, could outpace morality by several miles. Let's drift there for now, in the quiet aftermath of all that noise. In Part 2, we'll float deeper into how these weapons didn't just change the war, but rewired the way humans thought about killing, technology, and the future itself. Because, as it turns out, once you invent a better way to destroy something, you never really stop improving it.